A woman was so upset at a recent HUD meeting in San Francisco, actually, at something at what HUD Secretary Ben Carson, something that he had set up, upset her so much that she walked out of the meeting in protest. And let me tell you a little bit about what was said. Carson expressed concern about big, hairy men trying to infiltrate women's homeless shelters during an internal meeting, according to 3 people present who interpreted the remarks as an attack on transgender women. Now, 2 staffers also told the Washington Post that he complained society seems to no longer know the difference between men and women. And now this is not the first time Carson has made dismissive comments, and I guess you could say dismissive at the least, about the trans community. Take a look at this.
Dr. Carson, should transgender men and women use any public bathroom they choose?
How about we have a transgender bathroom?
Would that be your solution, your proposal?
Sure, absolutely. There is absolutely
how would that work?
It is not fair for them to make everybody else uncomfortable. It's one of the things that I don't particularly like about the movement.
All right, as HUD secretary, he weakened Obama-era protections for transgender people, saying he believes in equal rights, not special rights. And back in May, you may remember the agency introduced a proposal that would allow federally funded shelters to deny people admission on religious grounds or force transgender women to share bathrooms and sleeping quarters with men. Another government official actually told the Post that he has repeatedly mocked transgender people in meetings in Washington, saying his overall tone is dismissive and joking about these people. It's disrespectful of the people we are trying to serve. And of course, on the other side of this, a HUD senior official released a statement denying all of these accounts, specifically saying the secretary does not use derogatory language to refer to transgendered individuals. Any reporting to the contrary is false.
I'm so glad we're doing this story because frequently transgender issues are not given the time and place, and these comments and the policies that HUD, that at Ben Carson's helm, are making transgender people's lives so much more vulnerable. Transgender women of color have a life expectancy of 35 years old. And that's compared to the national life expectancy of 78 years old. And what is that tied to? That is tied to being excluded from shelters, and especially since transgender folks are likely to become unhoused. 1 in 3, according to some recent surveys of transgender folks, have been unhoused, and when they can't go into shelters, what ends up happening? They become more vulnerable to physical and sexual violence. So they're suffering in the shadows if they're not, if this is happening and we're not doing something about it and holding Carson's department accountable. And I'm really proud of the people within HUD who walked out and shared, even though it was anonymously, with the Washington Post about what was going on and what's being said and the ways that transgender people continue to be demonized. And let me just say one last thing, and that is that it's not transgender people that are the predators. It is people like Larry Craig, who was senator of Idaho, who went into a bathroom, and he was the one that propositioned folks in a stall, and he's a incredibly homophobic conservative. And it's these folks who make people's lives dangerous in bathroom stalls. It's never been transgender people. So this kind of cis anxiety is always placed onto transgender people, and they're the ones who are the most vulnerable.
It's the way we've always kind of done it in the country. It's the otherism of whoever that we want to demonize, and then therefore eventually attack. So we talk about the deaths that come for transgender folks, specifically transgender folks of color, because of this othering, because of the fear that's also bred. So when Ben Carson has multiple things he did officially from his own perspective, what he thinks makes us uncomfortable, even with transgender folks being able to go into any restroom that they identified to, then that leads to you thinking, oh man, they're so scary to me. Let's breed this fear within them. Now, you talked about the unhousing. I'm glad you did with that too, because many reasons that many transgender folks become unhoused is because maybe their parents or their family reject them because they make them uncomfortable, or they can't get particular jobs that can pay anything because they make people uncomfortable, or because they walk down the street and someone decides to look at them and attack them because they make them uncomfortable. Maybe they don't even get to the nature of many people of color proper care at hospitals because they make people uncomfortable. So when you make someone uncomfortable, what can you do to them? You can push them aside, you can murder them, you cannot give them equal rights, you can say, hey, why are they trying to push their agenda on me? So when there's pride parades that happen, and then the sign we just saw in some of this B-roll that says trans is beautiful, they say, why do you keep throwing this in my face? Because every day what you throw in their face is you're weird, you make me uncomfortable, I wanna kill you. So that's the response to someone then being a victim and being pushed and having so much violence pushed upon them every day of their lives from the people that gave them birth in many instances. And we're mad at them for doing what? Trying to not be on the streets?
Yeah. Yeah, and then the administration, not the administration, sorry, Ben Carson is framing it as creating a realm of extra rights, not equal rights, because clearly we have a fair housing policy in this country. And so he's saying it falls outside of the bounds of fair housing and goes into the realm of extra rights. Let me just translate for you what this means. Extra, it means that if you don't fit within the heteronormative, white, patriarchal framing, you are extra. And that, it's so remarkable how people can see people who are so much more vulnerable and see them as a threat.
Yeah, somehow. But then, and also, I'm sorry, Brooke.
No, go for it.
I'm sure you get to say something again before this is over. So even in some of these rules that Ben Carson's been heading to put in place, so you make sure certain folks that you deem, whatever gender you want to call them, you put them in certain housing situations because, why? Because you're afraid of them doing what? When obviously the evidence and the history behind the violence that's done to folks, they are the victims.
Right.
The basis and the facts just don't match up with what your fear is telling you.
Yeah, that's actually leads right into what I was going to say is that we hear a lot of fear mongering of what's going to happen to your kids in a bathroom and this and that and nothing. I have not seen one example of a trans person attacking, peeking at, hurting, assaulting a child in a bathroom anywhere. Yeah. What I have seen is teachers, principals, adults, priests, doing and saying horrible things to trans kids. I've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen that a lot, and a lot of it has to do with the bathroom. And what this is just creates an excuse for hate. Yeah, with no actual facts to base it on.
Yeah, if you hear anything that he's saying in any of the conversations that are being leaked, he is basing none of his comments on any data. It's virtually unsighted, unsourced material, just that I've heard that they said that they feel uncomfortable if big hairy men come in here. There's nothing that he can point to at all.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, the big hairy men thing, they've tried to at least write off as saying, that's not what he was saying. So first off, there's the outright denial. Ben Carson didn't say this, and anybody who reports he said this is wrong. Based on what? Like he has a history, he has a track record. Why is it we don't believe the obvious nature in front of us? Why deny that when we have 7 other instances of him doing this publicly, proudly, and thinking that's a viable option for when he's running for president? It's not like it's something that's unbelievable. It's completely within his character to do that.
Yeah. So many of these people, I think about this like often these days, so many of these people like we had no idea. I think often about how like Jeanine Pirro was a judge in charge of people's futures and people's freedoms, and that this man was a black king. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like how often were we taught about the greatness of Dr. Ben Carson, and he's a hate monger.
Yeah, I have,
and I would have never known. Yeah.
I have a friend who was a neurosurgeon resident, and one of his big fears was that he was going to grow as arrogant as Ben Carson because he knew that Ben Carson took these really decisive stances based on his character. And you know, I don't want to say the profession produces that, but if you're a neurosurgeon, you make really, really grave decisions in a short amount of time.
Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.